And this guy's continuing his story. That's my line, you see, Gerd. Not to bully her, not to play the tyrannical parent, but if possible, by giving this Ettling boy full rope to let him hang himself with her. These are not the days for acting the feudal baron. These are days when young people do what they like. My own feeling is that if my womenfolk had not started worrying her about it and insulting young Attling, it would never have got as far as it has. What I was wondering, Johnny, was this, whether perhaps you could see your way to take her into your own house for a time. You've got an official position in the place. My savage sister in Bath couldn't say you were an irresponsible person to put a young girl with. My niece is staying with the mayor of Glastonbury and taking the waters there. I can hear the old Spitfire retailing it to her cronies. My brother put his foot down at last on this bohemian life of hers in Mark Court. Well, my boy, what do you say to all this? We could tell the dear ladies that the child was helping you with your pageant, the ragdoll factory, and so on, eh? Bloody Johnny's face had been a scroll of flickering enigmas, while the surprising discourse flowed from his entertainer's lips. He had had time to imagine with intense vividness the stir that it would make in his quiet menage, the sudden introduction of Lady Rachel under his roof. He was more than a little tempted to cry out an immediate assent to Lord P's complimentary suggestions. How thrilled his faithful Megan would be! How she would murmur about the antiquity of Rye's family and their connection with the old Welsh prince. Why, before he knew it, the good lady would be discovering some remote cousinship between herself and this noble guest. But it would never do. He saw awkwardness, difficulties, complications at every turn. No, he said emphatically, looking straight into the peer's little piercing sky-blue eyes. No, Lord P, I cannot take Lady Rachel into my house, nor do I wish even to talk about it. I beg you to let it rest at that. It would never do. But... And he laid his hand on his host's wrist, who had impassionedly pushed back his chair and was apparently about to rise. I can tell you someone who would be the very person to send your child to and leave her with. Someone about whom they would have no reason to worry at all. I have no intention of thrusting my daughter on any of you good Glastonbury people, replied the Marquis in a huff. I would never have talked to you about this at all if I hadn't supposed... Enough, my lord, interjected Mr. Gerd sternly. I assure you I am serving you well in this. Let me at least talk to the person I have in mind. I believe she would be overjoyed to take Lady Rachel. And I swear to you, she and she only in all our town would serve your purpose as I understand it. Hum, mumbled the Marquis, allowing himself to melt a little, but still talking a high and mighty tone. And who is this very kind and condescending lady, if I may take the liberty of asking? It was Elizabeth Crowe, Lord P, that I had in mind. She's an aunt of the manufacturer, but she takes after her mother, the wife of my old Norfolk friend, a woman who was a devoire, a woman who was, sir, entirely and utterly, if I may say so, a lady in your most intimate Zoyland sense of the word. She is, in fact, I whisper this in your ears, Lord P, the only real lady, in your sense of the word, in all Glastonbury. Your sister, Lady Bessie Zoyland, could not take exception to her. Miss Elizabeth talks and feels and acts like a devoire. You yourself would feel it in a second. The Marquis smiled grimly. But it seems to me, my good Johnny, that you miss the whole drift of my long oration. The point is that I don't want a devoire for my daughter. Your Miss Crowe would be just the same as if I sent her to Bessie in Bath. The child would run away, I tell you. She'd run away and elope with her middle Zoy farmer. Mr. Gerd held his own obstinately and calmly. Well, my lord, we don't know yet that Miss Crow would be willing to take your daughter. This I do know, that if she is, she would fill the bill exactly. I did get all you implied in what you said just now. Everything. And I swear to you that in no single point could you do better than Miss Elizabeth. She is, if you allow me to say so, a lady after your own heart, Lord P. The Marquis pulled up his chair to the table again and refilled his own and his guest's wine-glass. His fierce little blue eyes kept wandering uneasily about the room as if he expected in any moment to learn that Mr. Edward Atling of Middlezoy was waiting to see him. Well, Johnny, you go ahead and test your woman out. You know exactly what I want from her. I don't want Rachel separated from Atling, but I don't want her affair with him encouraged. What I really want is for Rachel herself to get fed up with the boy. If your Miss Crow can catch the nuance of all that, she certainly is, as you say, a woman after my own heart. The mayor of Glastonbury had won his little game of chess, only just in time, for at this moment the door opened and old Bellamy came shuffling in to announce that Mr. William had driven over from Wells and was waiting in the hall. Is Lady Rachel with him? Yes, your lordship. Tell him we'll be down at once. It was some 3 hours later that Mr. Gerd and Will Zoyland, together with Lady Rachel and her father, were drinking tea by the library fire. The library at Mark's Court was a room very seldom used. Indeed, Lord P.'s orders to have the fire lit there this Sunday afternoon were received with sheer indignation by Mr. and Mrs. Bellamy. A persecuted Sergeant Blimp, who pined for London as a tropical animal pines in the Nordic Zoo, had not offered to light the fire himself, and it may well be that his lordship's commands would have led to a mutiny in the kitchen. The walls of this room were brown with old folios. There was no modern books in the shelves at all. Folios and quartos of every shade of brown and yellow and dirty white, but principally brown, combined in some of the upper shelves with a few duodecimos, bound in the same manner, presented to Mr. Gerd's eyes and mind a most curious and almost dreamlike impression. Well, I suppose we should look up what that word is. Some kind of book, no doubt. Duodecimos. A size of book page that results from the folding of each printed sheet into 12 leaves. Okay. Let me look at an image. Alright, so it's like a very large book, it looks like. Perhaps. Alright. Well, now we kind of know. The presence of these books had a peculiar effect upon him as he sat sipping his tea and listening to these three Zoylands talking in their family affairs. He became suddenly conscious, with a grim exultation, of the long history of the human race. And he felt as if every moment of that history had been a thing of books and would always be a thing of books. He thought of the great books that had molded history. Books like Plato, Rousseau, Marx. And there came over him an overpowering sense of the dramatic pliancy, suggestibility, malleability of the masses of human beings. The three Zoylands' heads fell as he looked at them, and looked past them at those huge shadowy brown shelves, into a symbolic group of human countenances. The high thin brow, big nose, and pointed beard of the Marquis, the roving blue eyes and great yellow beard of Will Zoyland, the white face clustering brown curls and long black eyelashes of the young girl became to him an allegorical picture rich with Rembrandt-like chiaroscuro of the three ages of the journeying human psyche. There are three extended shadows, with a huge toad-like image of watchful detachment hovering above them. That was himself. became to him the dreamlike epitome of what these silent, brown-backed creatures had projected, had manifested in palpable form from their teeming limbo of bodiless archetypes. Okay. It was beginning to become for Bloody Johnny, as he drank cup after cup of strong tea and withdrew more and more into his secret thoughts, one of the great ocean wave crests of his conscious life. Something seemed pouring through him, a strange, conquerable magnetic force, pouring through him out of that piled-up mystery of printed matter. He seemed to visualize humanity as a great turbid stream of tumultuous waters, from the surface of which multitudinous faces, upheaved shoulders, outflung arms, all vaporous and dim, were tossed forth continually. And he was standing there with wide-straddling legs and deep-planted feet, armed with a colossal spade. And with the spade, he was digging the actual riverbed, the new riverbed, along which the wild, half-elemental, half-human flood was destined to pour. And there flooded into Mr. Gurd's soul, as he gazed at the brown books above the silver candlesticks and above those 3 Zoyland heads, a feeling of almost unbounded power. He felt as though he possessed in that invisible, ethereal being at his side a fountain of occult force upon which he could draw without stint. He felt that his own personal will, the will of John Gird, was free beyond all limitations, beyond all credibility, beyond all expectation. And it was free because he had faith in its freedom. It was extremely distasteful to Mr. Gird when these 3 Zoylands began to grow aware that they had been neglecting their guest. Lady Rachel was the first to grow conscious of this, and she plunged at once into the most dangerous of all common topics just then, the character of Mr. Philip Crow. "How do you get on with your boss, Will?" the girl asked during a pause in her table, with a gleam of roguery in her soft, gypsy-like eyes. "You won't like it very much if I tell you everything I think of Philip Crow," growled the bastard in his deep bass voice, addressing Mr. Gird point blank. "Why should I mind?" murmured Mr. Gird casually. But he began frowning and turning about, and smoldering black eyes rather awkwardly from the careless blue ones of his adversary. Like all possessors of magical power, Mr. Gird was liable to be thwarted, baffled, frustrated, nonplussed by the simplest defiances, whereas with complicated and subtle antagonisms he would be all alert. The shameless candor and rough dog-and-gun manners of Will Zoyland had always rather worried Mr. Gird, not exactly frightened him, but confused and discomfited him. The bastard now laughed loudly till his great yellow beard wagged. "Why should you mind? Lordy, lordy, but that's funny. It's as though I was watching 2 great hound dogs fighting like mad, and when I licked one of them with my foot it tried to make out that it was only playing. Why should you mind? Oh, my dear sir, only because of that country nose, that you and Philip Crow are like a bull and a bulldog." Oh, I still got time. Okay. Keep on reading then. "Which is which?" inquired Lord Rachel. "I mean, which is the bull and which is the dog?" Bloody Johnny turned an almost reproachful look towards the girl, as if she had betrayed him by joining in her half-brother's buffoonery. But Zoyland had worse bolts than that in his arsenal, and he was in a mood to use them all. He turned to the Marquis now. "I think you're a fool, Father," he said, "if you let our business-like mayor here entangle you in his grand row with Crow. No. Hear me out, Father. Hear me out. I know very well that old friends you and Mr. Crow are. That's not the point. The point's hard, bedrock business. The point's politics, Father, local politics, of which, if I may say so, you know very, very little." "William's not being offensive to you, Gird, I hope," broke in the Marquis. "If you are, William, I wouldn't have it. I won't have these modern manners at my tea-table, do you hear, boy? I don't think William meant to be rude to Mr. Gird, Father. I think it was sort of a challenge to him, like those of the old days. Wasn't it, William? You feel you are bound to be faithful to Mr. Geard, isn't Mr. Crow, isn't it that, William? All three men stared at the young girl. They stared at her with the puckered foreheads of grown people irritated by a child's simplicity, and with the shrewd-up eyelids of men wondering what a woman was going to say next. Oof. Rachel had managed somehow, in a manner at once feminine and childish, to take the wind out of all their sails. Mr. Geard looked at her with deep reproach. The Marquis thought in his heart, sensible infant, she won't let Will bully Johnny. But Johnny's getting touchy. By God, he is. That's where his hoi polloi comes out. Doesn't know how to deal with a blunt rascal like our William. Damned if his eyes haven't already got that shifty, resentful, mean look you see in any low-class person when you've kicked his shin or hustled him a bit. Gad! I've had thought old Johnny was above getting that look. It seems to me that I'm doing Mr. Geard a good turn, went on Will Zoylan obstinately, by telling you what I think about his quarrel with Crow straight to his face rather than waiting till he's gone and can't defend himself. Anyway, I'm one of, as you know, Father, for throwing down all the cards. The Marquis stroked his little pointed beard pensively. The yellow-haired ruffian was evidently a pet of his and held a role in his house, whether he turned up, parallel to that of the ancient court jester. Only the Zoylan bastard was more realistic. I'll stop there. Boy, it's getting steamy in this room now. I'm going to open these windows. Well, until next time, I'll be waiting for you back in Glastonbury. Cheers.